Author Susanna Moore burst onto the literary scene in 1982 with her critically acclaimed My Old Sweetheart. The book was the first of a trilogy of novels set in Hawaii about young women making their way in the world, something she did. Taking a departure from those works, she has now written her fourth novel, In the Cut. Much has been said about it. It is still the same good writing. It has also been called, in this book, a stunning erotic thriller. Here to talk about this book, In the Cut, is Susanna Moore. Welcome. It's great to see you. When you finish this, I said we'd be here, and I'm really happy to have you.
Here we are. Thank you.
You grew up in Hawaii.
Yes.
Your father was a physician?
Yes.
Your mom?
My mother died when I was a child.
So you were there with him?
Yes, and I was the oldest of 7 children.
Yeah. Attracted to not the establishment, but to the liberation, and attracted to what in Hawaii? What was it you liked about the place?
I think that I saw, and my family still lives there, and I go often. I think that what I saw as a child was that there was this other world, secret to me, close to me, that was not Haole or Caucasian, in which everything that was of any interest to me was taking place, whether it was language or sex or music or food or dress or the kind of cars, and I guess that was when I first had that sense of outsiderness, which I think writers have in common.
Almost peering through the...
Yes, and that separation of self in a way, and that being able to observe yourself in a scene, all unconscious at the time.
You came to New York at
Yes.
16 or 17.
Yes.
Worked at Bergdorf's,
Yes.
Bergdorf Goodman, modeled or did some other things like that. Ended up in Hollywood at some point as a script reader for Nicholson and Beatty and maybe others. Got married, had a child, was now in her 20s.
Yes.
Went to London
Yes.
after your divorce
Yes.
to write.
Again, to get away, I think. My friends tell me I have a habit of doing this, of moving on and on and on and on, other places. I didn't know that it was to write, although it turned out to be the place where I began my first book.
Why did you turn to writing, you think?
I was in a position in which, for the first time, I didn't have to earn my living by other means. And I think that I had always been a writer. You know, the question I'm often asked is, how do you become a writer? Or how did I become a writer? And I don't think you become a writer. I think you are, and if you're lucky, you're in a position or a situation or circumstance in which you are able to write. And that's what happened to me.
My Old Sweetheart, published in 1982, won the PEN Ernest Hemingway Citation, the Sue Joffman Prizes from the American Academy Institute of Arts and Letters, followed by The Whiteness of Bones in 89, Sleeping Beauties in 93, and now In the Cut in 95. What was it that, what were you writing about in those books? In My Old Sweetheart and The Whiteness of Bones and Sleeping Beauties. What was the theme there? What was it that you were expressing?
I think in retrospect, because I don't really know it at the time that I'm doing it. It's why I like a book tour so much, which I've just finished, because I now know more about In the Cut than when I wrote it. Because
it makes you think about it because
and
of
having to
questions.
answer questions. Those books are about the past and about memory. And I think because I grew up in Hawaii at a time when the 19th century was becoming very, very quickly the 20th century, even though it was 1960. I was witness to a traumatic and frightening transition. Frightening for everybody there, I think. Traumatic. I mean, it changed overnight from a sleepy place to a busy, commercial, crowded place. And in that process, things were lost overnight. And I think that as a child, I was very conscious and depressed, perhaps because my mother had died, so I was already very interested in things that are lost. I was very upset by it as a child.
After that, you decide you want to write a thriller, or you want to write something different.
Yes,
you want
and
to
not
create,
about myself.
You wanted to create characters that were different than the characters you had created before. Is it then that you began to do the kind of research in which you spent some 2 years with homicide detectives, following them around, getting inside of them, watching them do everything that they do, understanding their language, understanding their friendships, understanding the world they inhabit, you know, and understanding their work.
I didn't know what I was going to write. As I said, I just knew it was going to be about New York. And I think, too, in the back of my head, I realized this lately, that I minded a little bit. I didn't know it at the time, being described always as a novelist of place. Because I think all novelists, most novelists are novelists of place. And it seemed to me to be a little limiting. And the idea, I wasn't sure I could do it, but if I could, I was interested in trying to see if I could write not about Hawaii. Because, of course, what happens is, as you know, perhaps, is that you do believe, part of you does believe the criticism that people have for you.
If you don't believe it, it bothers you, for sure.
Yes.
And so they were saying you were a novelist of place and you wanted to do something different in terms of character and thriller.
No more palm trees. Let's see, no more gardenias. And so I wrote to the New York Police Department to get permission to spend time with detectives. And I was very specific. I wanted homicide detectives. And they gave me this permission. And I was originally allowed, I think according to the rules, 6 hours or 7 hours.
And you assumed it'd be a couple of months or 6 hours? Or?
No, I knew that it was going to, I knew that I was limited to 6 hours, and I knew that I was going to have to work really hard during those 6 hours to be invited back. Because I knew 6 hours wasn't enough.
And you knew you had to do what? You had to make them know and think about themselves in a way that they would find interesting, so they'd want you back.
Well, I had to make them trust me. Not being a journalist was an enormous advantage. That right away that I was a novelist, because they're used, these two detectives in particular, because they were very knowledgeable and wise, were used to taking around movie stars and reporters, and they're very leery, as you can imagine, of reporters, having been burned a few times. So the fact that I didn't have a camera, that I wasn't taking notes, that I was working on this curious thing called a novel, I think put them at ease. And then I think that my asking them unaccustomed questions and...
Like?
Well, it will sound strange, but because it would seem to you, as it did to me, a rather straightforward elementary question. I remember asking one of them how he became a cop that first day.
I think that's a great question.
And he said, you know, what are you talking about? I don't know. What do you mean I became a cop? I'm a cop. It's what guys did. You went into the Army, you went to work for Con Ed, or you became a cop.
My friend was a cop. My father was a cop. Somebody I knew was a cop.
And then this detective, a day or two later, came back to me and said, you know, I was thinking about when I became a cop and why, and I mean, you asked me and I couldn't answer it, but I've been thinking about it. And then this would start a whole, and of course, the questions got harder and harder, so it was, I think they were seduced and charmed by by being taken out of their more prescribed but more natural orbit and being asked by me these both commonplace and odd things.
The basic questions are always the best. The book's dedicated to Tommy Highland, detective, first grade NYPD. He was one of them, I assume.
Yes.
Tell me, is he Malloy?
Malloy isn't just one person. Malloy is a lot of Tommy Highland and a lot of the other detectives and captains and men that I met.
Who is Rodriguez?
Rodriguez is a detective that I met and like very, very much, who's in the 2-4 on the west side, who really does have a holster with the island of Puerto Rico painted on it. And at the time that I met him, really did have a water pistol.
And he knows he's Rodriguez?
Yes. I made sure that he knew in case he were to object, because I was very careful not to put in anything that would get any of them in trouble.
I'll get to the book in a minute. Tell me what you found about their world. What is it about them? You describe them as very attractive to women. They have a certain language of their own. They have a capacity to immediately identify a case, box in the box, whatever.
I was quite naive at first and innocent, and had ideas about how they worked which were completely inaccurate. For example, they didn't listen to a police radio, which I thought was so curious. They listened to Sinatra, Saturday with Sinatra. They listened to oldie stations or jazz. And little things at first I noticed, for example, if there were a police car stopped by the side of the road, they didn't stop. It seemed odd to me that they would just keep going in traffic. They wouldn't even look. And less amusingly, I was very interested to discover, and I saw this pretty soon, that there's no finality or continuity to what they do. They're on because the murder rate, and those years it was higher than now. This was maybe 4 years ago. Required that they be jumped constantly. So they'd be on a case maybe 2 or 3 days before their turn, before in their language would be to catch a case before they caught the next case. So nothing was ever finished, nothing was solved, nothing was ever really even investigated.
They kind of get it started and then they move on, and keeping track of it, but moving on, always moving on.
Unless they were working on something that was controversial or frightening to the public, say like a rape in Central Park, or if it were somebody important who was killed. And they say themselves that if they don't have a good idea in the first 24 hours, it's the likelihood of a case being closed is low.
Their attractiveness to women, what is it?
Well, I mean, they're a kind of icon of masculine power, and they do the worst thing I can say, perhaps, is that they live out a kind of masculine adolescent fantasy.
Which is?
Boys together, hierarchy, there's ranking, so it's safe. They have guns. They have
violence.
They are very good at practical jokes. There's constant teasing and playing, sometimes a little mean. There's tremendous freedom. They don't have to go home at night. They're very strong parallels to the behavior.
And you became
idealized of
and you became part of all this, in a sense, because you became...
I tried.
I mean, you were there. I mean, they trusted you.
They trusted me.
So
although I think an element
brought you into their world.
Yes, I think they liked too a little bit seeing how much I could take. I realized that at a certain
Testing
point.
You.
Yeah, let's see if she can, what she thinks about this, or let's see if she gets sick to her stomach. Now.
Did you?
No, but
you saw some stuff you never thought you'd ever see in your life.
No, but it took a great deal of discipline and concentration on my part not to. It sounds horrible to act like a girl. To be. I don't even really mean that, but that's.
I know what you mean.
In the sort of. In keeping up the metaphor of adolescent boy.
You wanted to say, I can keep up.
Yes, I didn't want to jump on a chair and scream if I saw a mouse.
Have they read the book?
Yes.
And what do they think?
They like it a lot.
Both?
Yes. All of them, because I met so many of them. But I mean more than just the two that took me around. They were very interesting about it, because as I said, I checked things with them. Because, for example, the very clearly says that they take things from... The detective says it from, dead bodies, and when I asked them about, for example, that would be an example. Do you want me to take that out? It's easy to take it out. It's not an important plot point. And they both said, no, it's fine. Leave it. We'll lie. They have great confidence in the.
Why is the dedication only to one of them?
Because he was the one who really did help me the most. He was, and I was closest to him out of the whole group. There would not be this book without Tommy Hyland. There would have been another book, but there would not have been this particular book.
Has this book been sold to the movies? I mean, it's perfect for the movie.
Not yet. Do you think so?
Oh, God, I mean, the ending is amazing, and we shouldn't give that away because that's part of the drama of this book. I mean, as it unfolds. Let me go now to Franny. She is divorced.
Yes.
She is writing about street lingo,
Yes.
which you introduce us to, words that I didn't know. Says something about my age. Words that you probably didn't know when you came.
No, a lot I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, the words, all of it. She has a friend, Cornelius, who's a student. He's close to her. She witnesses one night, while she's with Cornelius, sex taking place with a man with a tattoo, oral sex. And she goes to the bathroom. She doesn't see his face, sees a tattoo, redhead woman, later dead, mutilated. We're off and running with a story, right?
Right. I hope so.
We are. There are other deaths in this story at the hand of the same murderer. Her friend is killed. There is eroticism here, sexual. What's that about? I mean, what from you? I mean, I want to know why, Susanna. Were you intrigued? Did you want to write about it? It's natural to the story, or more? And
it's not necessarily, I don't think, natural to the story. It was one of the things I set out to do. I wanted to see if I could write about sex. And
you can.
Oh, thank you. It's not easy, I don't think, to do for any writer, for all sorts of reasons, complicated reasons. And one of the reasons that I was a little intimidated by it was that I know that I write in a way that almost compels any reader to decide unequivocally, even though I deny it, that the character in the book, the woman, is me. So that made me a bit. I had that always in the back of my mind.
The character is you. Of course, it's you.
Oh, Charlie, I've just spent the last 2 months saying that it wasn't.
But it is. And you know it is.
Well,
why are you denying it? She's strong.
It's me
sexual.
and it's not me. It's me and it's not me.
She likes the role reversal stuff. She likes the knowing that these men are the object of... She's in control in many ways.
There are similarities between Franny and me. She's not like me in a lot of ways too. She's quite different. She's more isolated than I am, more solitary and a little tougher. In a way, she's an idealized me. You could say that, because there's a very specific tone in the book which I know puts some people off, which is an ironic, self-mocking tone, which I think has been misunderstood as arrogance or coldness or even neurosis, and that wasn't my intention. She's you know, the book is also about language.
Very much.
And I'm always interested when people say to me, oh, the book is so violent, the book is so violent. It's really only violent in the last 5 or 6 pages.
How hard was it to write that?
Oh, it was, I wrote it, I've been thinking about it a lot because I wrote it last Thanksgiving. I was shocked by the end. I never intended it. I never imagined it. In fact, I imagined quite the contrary happening. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I was shocked. And I went back maybe a month after I finished and tried to remedy the ending, so to speak.
Remedy?
And, well, it's hard to talk about it without giving it away.
That's why I'm staying.
To give it a happy ending.
But you couldn't.
I couldn't. It was as if I would betray her were I to do so. Which sounds so... That's irony.
What's next? I mean, where do you go from here? I mean, was this sort of emotionally more difficult, more charged
yes,
than anything
yes.
you've done.
You can tell, I think,
Yeah.
can't you? Yes. And one reason more emotionally difficult is that it takes place in the present. In a way, and it's about the present, and I suppose the future, whereas the other books were really about the past and what you do with it.
Memory.
It's who you become, how you hold on to these things. Are Hawaiian words worth preserving?
And this is about?
This is very modern, I think. This is really a book about the end of the 20th century. So a friend of mine said it was a book about the end of the world.
Why did they say that?
I wouldn't have gone so far. Well, I think it was set in despair at the conditions, I suppose, of the culture.
Yeah. How we could come to this. Yes?
Yes, the alienation, the violence, the...
In the Cut, Susanna Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.